Blessings. It's Tuesday night, so there's a few questions have come in. First question. Sometimes I feel that I practice daily and I'm not going anywhere. And this applies to all aspects of my life, especially work. Then I lose my determination as it seems like I'm not going anywhere. Sometimes I tell myself to try harder to get myself out of this cycle. So, not a clear question, but a very common experience. We often feel that our practice is not progressing. Sometimes feel like life is not going anywhere, as you've described. Well, one reflection I use, it could be worse. Things could be worse. I assume you're referring partly to meditation. If you do some regular meditation practice, it's natural that sometimes you'll feel enthusiastic, sometimes you'll feel fed up, or bored, or restless, or feel like it's not going anywhere, not getting anywhere. All of this is very normal. But the first aim might be just to know how you're feeling, to have enough awareness, enough mindfulness to know that. That's already a step up, a step in the right direction, even to know that you're feeling like it's hopeless. Try as much as you can just to be aware. That's the primary object of any meditation technique, is to bring your attention to the present moment, even if you're feeling awful. Sometimes we're ill, sometimes we're in a mood, sometimes things are going badly, but just to know that. And try to bring up as much consistent awareness in the midst of that mood or that feeling or whatever's going on. And to accept that your mind is like that, partly it's just past karma. You felt like that before, so those feelings come up again. Partly it's an attitude thing, you might say. Like we're always looking for results, looking for rewards from what we do. Whether we're talking about work or meditation or any aspect of life, relationships, we always want something from this. If we're not careful, we think in that way. We expect something, we want something. But really this is still the cause for suffering. It's a desire that, if we haven't recognized, will keep making us feel discontent, dissatisfied. So another thing, not only you could reflect, oh, it could be worse, but also just come to reflect on the things that are good in your life, to appreciate what you have already, rather than thinking about what you're missing or what you want that you haven't got, or some goal that you haven't achieved, or some expectation that's not being met. Go back and say, well, what have I got? And often our situation is much better than we realize or than we think. If we have good health, that's already an amazing blessing. You have a job, your job may sometimes feel meaningless or pointless, but at least you have a job. It's better than not having a job. Relationships can be challenging and difficult, but try to see the good in yourself and the good in your partner or the person you're referring to, your family member or work colleague or whoever. Try to see the good in the different things that are making you feel that you're not going anywhere, or that things are not progressing, or you're not getting what you want. Try to see the good. Look for the good as a way to balance up your thinking. Another one I do, like when you're meditating, you may sit down to meditate and your mind is full of worries or anger or just a lot of random thoughts that you find difficult to control. But try to see the good that you're making the effort to train your mind, to develop your mind in a good way, to bring out mindfulness, to reflect on the Dhamma, to focus your mind on more positive, more good things. Even though it's challenging, just making that effort is a very special thing. So try to recognize that. The fact that you've heard the Buddhist teachings, you have faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, is a very positive thing in your life. If you didn't have the Buddhist teachings, what would it be like? If you didn't have the chance to meditate or develop yourself in the way of Dhamma, what would it be like? So yes, we probably can always try harder in our practice. There's more we can do, but we also have to practice with some wisdom and not endlessly criticize ourselves or our life or our work. We also have to look at things in a more balanced way, and mindfulness practice and training yourself to reflect on things can help there. So you're not just looking at what's wrong, what you haven't achieved, or what are all the bad things. There's another question. In the Noble Eightfold Path, may I know the difference between right and wrong concentration? So that would be Samma Samadhi and Miccha Samadhi. Samma is this word we translate as right or correct. Miccha means wrong, incorrect. What's correct or incorrect? Well, the Eightfold Noble Path is the path that leads us out of suffering, to the end of suffering. So if you're practicing it correctly, we say with right view, samadhi, or right samadhi, that's the goal, and it will become a factor, a cause for achieving that goal. Wrong samadhi, wrong view, or wrong anything in terms of the path will be not taking you to that goal. It will be taking you away from the goal of liberating yourself from suffering. So it'll actually be increasing your suffering, whether you realize it or not. The other thing is all these 8 factors of the Noble Path work together and support each other. But in the same way, if you're coming from a place of wrong understanding, wrong view, well, all the different factors will also support each other in your wrong action, your wrong intention, your wrong understanding. So again, you don't recognize what the goal is, or you have a wrong goal in mind, then everything you do towards that will be going in the wrong direction. So, Miccha Samadhi is often associated, traditionally it's associated with things like black magic or putting spells on people, curses, but it could be any kind of mental training where you're training in concentration of some form, but with the intention maybe to harm, which is obviously making bad karma and increasing the defilements based in anger or hatred. Maybe the intention to gain things for yourself without any awareness of what's moral or immoral, right or wrong. So using samadhi or developing samadhi to gain money or gain control of someone else in some way so that you can get their money or get power over them, use them in some way. So sometimes people train themselves, in various ways to have mental strength so that then they can manipulate other people or somehow get some advantage. Maybe they want to be like a con man or con woman to trick someone out of their money using a certain amount of psychology and mental strength. There's many ways. Some are more subtle, some are more gross, obvious. So like sometimes, particularly in cultures where meditation and mind training is established maybe for hundreds, even thousands of years, then there are those people who train their mind, but not for liberation in the way of Buddhism or in the way of the Noble Eightfold Path. They're training their mind because they just want to become famous or wealthy or successful in something, and they may even do things that are criminal or very shameful. So could be somebody who not always very unwholesome, but maybe just in a way that isn't conducive to the end of suffering yet, but just training their mind as a way to earn a living. So I knew one man who learned a method of developing samadhi so that he could hypnotize crocodiles, and then he would do a show where he was doing various things with crocodiles to earn money. So it wasn't really to cheat anyone or hurt anyone, it was just his way of earning living, but it wasn't using his mind to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. But he was someone who had a teacher who taught him a way of developing samadhi, a certain verse he used to recite, and he used to train himself so that he could then use his samadhi to hypnotize the crocodiles. Then get them to do things, like he'd stick his head in their mouth and they wouldn't attack him and that kind of thing. So you can use samadhi just to earn a living in that way. Or as I said, somebody could be a criminal, they use samadhi. So many instances, examples of people who have tried to con other people by using various mind control techniques that they've actually practiced and trained. So you might call that Micchā samadhi, and some people are quite good at it. They find vulnerable people or people whose concentration is not very good, and then they can convince them to. The obvious one is hand over their money. Sometimes they use a technique, they grab your hand and they rub your hand and they say various words, and people suddenly become very compliant and just hand over their wallet or their details of their bank account. You might call this sort of an ancient way of scamming someone. Nowadays it's all on computers, but there are still people who use their mind, train their mind to do this as well. Or people who do what we might call black magic, where they sit there meditating and then they send their mind to try and hurt someone else in some way, maybe that to literally hurt that person, or try to gain control of that person or direct influence that person in some way. You get that as well. But one thing with all these more unwholesome methods of mental training and samadhi is that it's quite hard to prove or understand what's going on because it's all invisible. So sometimes people haven't really trained their mind very well, but they claim they have, and then they use the fear factor to influence others. So they say things like, "I've put a spell on you," and "you are now under my control," and maybe many people wouldn't believe them, but there'll always be someone who does, and that person will now feel very scared and feel like they're suddenly under somebody's spell, and it can psychologically damage them quite badly. So there's many ways you can train your mind, but micca samadhi is combined with micca ditthi, wrong view, and it will be for some worldly gain, and maybe, and most likely will be creating negative karma for the one practicing or for the one on the receiving end. In the case of trying to manipulate other people, it will involve harming other people. Samadhi is always combined with right view, a good understanding of what is good and bad karma, and from there, what is good speech, good action, everything conducive to liberating the mind from mental defilements rooted in greed, anger and delusion. Not for increasing defilements, but for reducing them. So, Samma Samadhi is always part of the path for liberating the mind. It will be accompanied by very wholesome states of mind, wholesome feelings of piti and sukha, very positive, wholesome objects of mind, and then will be a good support for the development of insight into the true nature of phenomena, seeing things as impermanent, as not self. The Buddha always taught that samadhi is a basis for developing wisdom, or clear knowledge and vision, clear understanding of the way things are. Micca samadhi will increase delusion. Sometimes they call it dhirachana vichara, like animal knowledge. So people who develop micca samadhi sometimes they say are reborn as animals, or just reborn in not very good places, because they've been developing very negative qualities of mind and actually damaging some of their own human qualities, because they're developing their mind in a way just to harm others. Whereas Samma Samadhi is taking you closer to Nibbana. So if one develops Samma Samadhi, Ajahn Chah used to say, if your mind becomes one-pointed in the path, you're getting very close to Nibbana, because you're getting a taste of what the mind that is peaceful, has inner peace, it's not dependent on external objects, sense objects for its happiness, it's internally happy. And this one-pointed state of mind, the strong mindfulness, can then be directed to develop insight into impermanence, into not self. It's quite a long question here. My mother and older brother have been caught in a painful conflict for years. This time triggered by the difficult financial situation surrounding my father's coma and unresponsive state. In her distress, my mother called the police and sought a restraining order. Feeling hurt by this action, my brother responded to the court summons by also calling the police and applying for a restraining order against her, alleging domestic violence. This conflict is now severely hindering the already challenging process of applying for the insurance needed to cover my father's growing medical expenses. Their inability to cooperate is creating further complications, and I find myself helpless and emotionally exhausted in the midst of this turmoil. Luang Por, could you please guide me on how to support myself during this difficult time? And is there any wisdom you can share on how I might help bring my family back together towards understanding and reconciliation? Well, sounds like you're going through a very challenging time. So you'll need lots of patience. Any challenge or difficulty requires patience. It's the first point, first place. Learning to live with other people, whether it's in the family, work, or in society as a whole. The Buddha's kind of basic teachings are what we call the Brahma Viharas. Metta, goodwill. Ultimately what we call unconditional love, but beginning just as basic goodwill. And karuna, compassion. Mudita, sympathetic joy or appreciative joy. Upekkha, equanimity based on an understanding that everyone is the owner of their karma and has to receive the fruits of their karma. So these four qualities all are closely linked, but there may be one of those qualities that is appropriate at any one time to develop or hold in mind in certain situations. So in the case, say, of family members falling out, it can be distressing because you live together or you meet each other, you've been together for many years maybe, but still it happens and it's very disruptive to everyone around. So that's another lesson, even though it's a painful lesson, it's a lesson in the value of harmony and cooperation. As you say, when you can't cooperate, then many people are affected. Things that need to be done don't get done or don't get done very well. So in the case of caring for a sick relative, or if the other family members are not cooperating, you can't care for the sick relative so well. This is a good example. So even though it's painful, at least one thing you learn is that, well, yes, harmony and cooperation is very valuable or invaluable, and everyone benefits. And disharmony, conflict, everyone suffers. So, sounds like you have the right aspiration. You want everyone to come back together again, at least on the one level where they can cooperate, work together to care for your father. And that's a very noble, good aspiration. But if it's not happening yet, you need the patience, and then maybe sometimes you just have to get on with it yourself, don't you? If other people around you are not doing the right thing or not able to control their emotions, then maybe you get on and do what you can in that situation. Say for your father, you do what you can, and try to be patient and compassionate towards your other family members, even though it may be a very frustrating time. Another lesson, you learn trying to use the legal system to fight each other. Everyone loses. The lawyers win, but the people paying the lawyers lose. It's not an ideal way to go. So if people can come to their senses, forgive, and move on as soon as possible, that would be a good outcome. But maybe they're not ready for that. So you have to be patient and get on with what you see is right and what you see you can do from your own perspective, your own life. Sometimes others you just have to accept they're not going to harmonize and work together, so just leave them be, let them get on with it. You can't stop them or change them maybe, they have to change for themselves. So come back to yourself. And if you see negative qualities in people around you, well, try not to follow them and try not to be the same as them. Say, well, I could be angry like that, so I better not. And I'm not going to give in to my anger, even though other people around are. So you do the best you can. And you may feel helpless and exhausted. It's normal. But we always have more reserves of energy than we think. If you follow your thoughts say just give up, but that's a thought. You'll still have something left even when you have the thought to give up. You just have to pace yourself, get enough rest, find ways to recharge in the midst of helping the family and in the midst of the quarrelling or whatever. Pace yourself, help when you can, and then get some rest and private time when you can. and you keep going, and don't believe every negative thought that comes into your mind, because you have lots of them, but they're just negative thoughts. Try and recognize that. Maybe get some good advice and good help, whatever good help you can get in your situation. Maybe there are other family members who also understand the problem and can give some support, or other people around, healthcare workers, people, whoever you can rely on or get help from, or maybe you have to look to them to support you as well in what you're doing. So, life isn't always easy, but looking after your mind in the midst of the problem will help immensely. Don't give in to the negative thoughts, don't give up, keep going, be patient, keep coming back to more positive thoughts, do what you can in the situation. And sometimes other people, you just have to let them go and not worry too much about them. If they're reasonably healthy but they're just arguing, then just let them exhaust themselves with their arguing while you get on and do the right thing, which is maybe caring for your father. Even monks can do that. I remember when I was looking after Ajahn Chah, sometimes other monks would argue a bit about the right way to do it. And you just have to let them argue until they're tired of that, and then they wake up a bit and they come back and do what they're supposed to do. So it's just part of human life. What makes us argue, our attachment to our views and opinions, thinking we're right, our conceit, our arrogance. So again, reflect on these qualities, see if you have them. You may notice you sometimes also have some attachment to your own opinions, and your opinions sometimes may be right, sometimes not. So rather than getting caught up in other people and what they're saying and their opinions, come back to yourself and reflect on your own mind and your own practice. Luang Por, what is your recipe, or what are the ingredients for peace? Sounds like a meal, doesn't it? The ingredients for peace, well, I guess you could say the Noble Eightfold Path. Eight main ingredients. And they all have to be developed together, matured. Sometimes Ajahn Chah used to say, the 8 factors of the Noble Path have to be matured or ripened, and he would compare it to a fruit like a mango on the tree. There's ripening in the sun, and over time it becomes soft, juicy, sweet, and then you pick it and eat it. These qualities of the Noble Eightfold Path have to ripen together. So a little bit like a recipe, a meal. But it's all those factors of the Eightfold Path have to be developed together to get the result, which is clear knowledge and vision of the way things are, that allows you to free your mind from delusion, greed, anger, delusion. If you're missing out on one of the ingredients, one aspect of the path you don't develop, or you miss it out, then the whole thing won't gel, or won't mature, and you won't get the result. So a common one is precepts. We love to do some meditation, we listen to Dhamma, maybe we like to help other people do some dana. Well, we don't keep the precepts. It's quite common. So our practice doesn't really mature or go beyond a certain level because there's one vital aspect missing, or one ingredient is missing. So then the taste of the Dhamma is not very good. To keep on with the metaphor. So that's quite a common one. Sometimes people who are very kind people and they work hard for others and do a lot of charity and support people, but then they go off afterwards and get drunk. Or people who meditate a lot, but then they also, when they work, maybe they get very angry when they work, or Some people play around and have multiple partners even though they meditate and do other good things. People's lives are often a mixture of good and bad, or good or conducive to happiness, conducive to developing the path, and not conducive. Their actions will vary from time to time. So if you are going to use the idea of practice being like a recipe with different ingredients, well, we are lucky. We've got a good recipe book. We've got the Buddha and the suttas and the teachings. So take that as your starting point. Any recipe book is just the meal on paper. You still have to prepare it and cook it yourself, but try and follow the recipe that's there for you. And the Buddha's given us the recipe. He saved us all this time. So he says, keep the precepts, practice generosity and kindness, keep the precepts, develop mindfulness, reflect on the Dhamma, listen to the Dhamma, reflect on cause and result, and see where you're still holding on to negative views and negative thoughts that cause you suffering, and start letting go. Reflect on the impermanent nature of your body, your mind, and so on. If you do all of the right things, or you include the right ingredients, then there's a chance you'll get a good meal at the end. So we've actually got a good recipe book for our practice. It's all there. Now we have to actually put these ingredients together and do the practice, or make the meal. Ajahn Chah used to say it's like, going back to food again, he said, like, if you, in the old days, before they had electricity and fridges and things, they used to have to preserve meat and fish with salt. And you say, when you practice the Dhamma, you need wisdom. Whether you're practicing dana or sila or meditating or any aspect of the practice, you need wisdom to guide you, and you're developing wisdom, the ability to reflect, to learn and reflect on things, to gain some wisdom. Wisdom is always, the knowledge that helps reduce and prevent suffering. You need wisdom, just as like when you're preserving fish or meat, you need salt. Otherwise your fish, your meat will go rotten, especially in a hot country like Thailand. They'd always use salt, sometimes a lot of salt, to preserve meat in the sun, in the hot weather, in the old days before refrigeration. So, most recipes will involve a bit of salt, won't they? So you always need your wisdom in your practice. It's an important ingredient you can't be without. So where's the wisdom? If you haven't got much wisdom in a situation, it probably means you're suffering. Or if you're suffering, there's no wisdom. So don't miss out the important ingredient. Ajahn, is it correct that Tibetan monks are not real bhikkhus? Since the 17th Karmapa can get married, have children, and still be treated as a religious leader, I wonder why is that? Oh, well, I'm not an expert on Tibetan monks and Tibetan Buddhism, so I hesitate to give too many judgments or opinions here. I know from our tradition, Theravada Buddhism, to become a Buddhist monk, you go through an ordination procedure. And myself, I'm actually you might say, qualified preceptor. I've been appointed a preceptor, meaning one who understands the Vinaya enough, trusted by the community to ordain other monks. Usually, in the Thai tradition, you have to have been a monk at least 10 years and, as I said, have enough experience in the practice of the Vinaya to understand it, to be able to train and ordain others. So that determines whether you're a bhikkhu or a Buddhist monk. In Theravada Buddhism is whether you've gone through the proper ordination procedure as we've inherited in our tradition. There's various rules and requirements, and if those rules and requirements aren't met, then the ordination might be invalid. And that's still held to very strictly nowadays particularly in Thailand, in the Thai Theravada tradition. If things are not done properly, then people will say that's not a correct ordination, you have to do it again. It may be invalid in some way. So that's the simple thing that determines whether you're a monk or not. And then once you're a monk, well, whether you're keeping the rules, particularly the 4 main rules. When you become a Buddhist monk, you're told 4 things that you must never do. One is commit an act of sexual intercourse, another is to steal, another is to kill, and another is to make false claims about being enlightened or attaining various supernormal states and so on. These are the 4 things never to be done that you're told immediately as you become a monk, because if you do them, you no longer are considered a monk. You lose that. So that's what I understand being a monk is. As far as other traditions, such as Tibetan or any other tradition, I can only go on what people tell me or I hear say. But just one thing, lay people can also be spiritual teachers, Dhamma teachers. There's no doubt about that, and we have them in the Theravada tradition as well. So a lay teacher would be somebody of good standing who would keep precepts, at least the 5 precepts, and maybe the 8 precepts, but at least the 5 precepts. They would keep them on a regular basis, because that's what the Buddha taught as a sort of basic standard for a Dhamma practitioner. There may be someone who studied, listened a lot, studied a lot, learned the texts, the suttas, the Vinaya, the Abhidhamma. Somebody who may have some skill and experience in meditation. So there are lay teachers, men and women, in the Theravada tradition who are respected, and some are even quite famous. So I would imagine in Tibetan tradition they would also have that as well. But where they draw the line between bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen, laywomen, lay practitioners, I don't know. I do know they have a number of different titles and different roles that Dhamma practitioners have, and some to the outsider like me seem a little blurry compared to Theravada Buddhism, where things are fairly clear-cut. An outsider might look at some of the different formats, some are monastics, some are not. Sometimes seems a little bit, the lines seem blurred. But as I said, I'm not an expert, so I don't feel really competent to make a comment. But I do know that there can be very good lay teachers in different traditions as well as monastics. And I hope Tibetan Buddhism has many good lay teachers and lay practitioners so that they can all progress in their practice. That would be my wish. Another question. Ajahn, for just a very brief moment, I understood metta meditation. Good. I tried before, but I just couldn't grasp it. I'm still not very good at it, but I am persisting with my practice of metta meditation. My question is, why do I feel so painful inside and cry? If I'm not thinking negatively or feeling nervous or being worried. Well, when we meditate, particularly say when you're sitting meditation, you're quiet, physically still, you turn your mind to an object, whether it's metta, goodwill, or the breath, or any other meditation object, you become aware of many things because you're now turning your attention back on your own body and mind. However well you can do it, however experienced you are, most people find very quickly they're noticing things about themselves, the way they think, the way they feel, physical sensations, mental moods and mental states. So if you're meditating and there's no immediate reason for you to feel emotional pain, physical pain, crying, states of sadness, if there's no immediate reason for that, well, it may mean that you've got accumulated stress, suffering, maybe from your other aspects of your life, from work, family, various things. That's just been sitting there in the back of your mind or underlying your experience, but most of the time you're not really noticing it or not fully aware of it. You may be partially aware, but when you start to meditate, it's like you peel away layers of delusion, and some of those layers peel away very quickly. So then you notice things, and they often seem much more clear to the mind. Sometimes they seem stronger or more exaggerated because now you're aware of them. So a very common experience is to notice pain, say pain in the heart region. Sometimes you can't quite tell whether it's a physical condition, have I got heart disease, or emotional pain, but it's just manifesting as almost physical pain. That's very common. And often there's no immediate reason for it. So sometimes it's events that happened a long time ago, trauma and suffering from the past that we've been carrying around, and it manifests as various feelings of tension, stress, physical and emotional pain. Very occasionally it's from a past life, but more likely is it's from this life, and it's like the knock-on effect or the result of various things that have happened in the past. Sometimes it's our own negative states of mind. We just keep thinking in a negative way, and we haven't fully realized that, and we certainly haven't been able to stop it. So you keep thinking in a negative way with anger or fear or worry, then you'll start to feel more and more uncomfortable in yourself. So when you start meditating, often you're noticing that. Or it could be a specific event that has had its effect on you and you're now becoming aware of it. It could be anger directed towards another person that's just sitting in your mind. Just giving a few examples here, but it's quite common. When you start meditating, you notice these things, they come up. So my advice would be very patient and keep establishing mindfulness and working with it. If you can be more and more mindful, more aware, but without reacting and creating more stress out of various painful feelings, you should find over time that they start to subside and hopefully even completely disappear. Meditation, when done correctly and with a good attitude, can be very healing, physically and mentally. It's not increasing your stress and pain. If it's done properly, it's reducing it. And a lot of that reduction comes from simply becoming aware of feelings, mental states, memories that trigger certain reactions, becoming aware of all of this, but not adding to it and not reacting in the same old habitual way, but now just acknowledging and then letting go. So particularly headaches, chest aches, feelings of tension around the body, and then even just mental pain can be overcome in this way with the positiveness of metta, goodwill, the clarity of mindfulness, the understanding of impermanence, reflecting on the impermanence of feelings, mental states, they arise, pass away. These different aspects of the path can help you ultimately to let go. And things can be let go of. It's possible to let go of everything, ultimately. But we do have, sometimes you have to accept there'll be certain kinds of pain you can't let go of. You can't stop the pain, as it were, but you can let go of your reaction to the pain. Your aversion to the pain, your concern, your worry about the pain, you can let go of that. But some painful feelings you just have to live with. Maybe there's some physical basis in your body and it's just not going away. Maybe you just have to accept that, but you change your attitude to it. So you also have to try and work that one out, whether it's the kind of pain that you might heal through your practice or the kind of pain you've got to learn to live with peacefully, because there are different kinds of pain. Last question. Lumpur, I am addicted to watching pornography. Any advice? Stop watching. That would be the easy answer. I'm told it's the biggest amount of internet traffic these days is pornography. I think it always has been. And that's just human beings. Our number one mental defilement is sexual desire, and expanding out from that, sensual desire. It's a very natural desire because you are born and your number one driving force is procreation of the species, survival of the fittest and replication of the species. But also with the development of society, technology, cultural changes, the opportunities to express that manifold. So obviously technology in particular is largely used to serve mental defilements these days. Technology can be very useful. It can transmit the Dhamma, help you to get enlightened as well. But I think that's a very small part of internet traffic these days, although hopefully it's growing. Whereas pursuing lust, hatred, greed in different forms is the more common way we use technology. So we have lots of opportunities, even unfortunately from very young ages now. But like, all addictions, in the end, you have to see the harm, the suffering it's causing you, because as long as you haven't seen that, you're not going to have much motivation or energy to change. So you have to see it as a cause of suffering, and then you have to start saying no to that desire to watch, to look, to see the harm of it. So different things help, any technique that helps you to be more mindful, so you catch desires as they're forming in your mind, so then you can have the choice, say no, before you've done it, before you look, before you press the button, before you engage that desire. Another part of the mind can come and say, no, don't do that. This is going to actually cause you more suffering than the little bit of pleasure that you might get from it. So you think it through, but then you have to start applying what you've thought through in practice. And one quality that will come up and help you, especially if you listen to Dhamma and associate with people who practice Dhamma, is the quality we call hiriyottappa, sense of shame. Shame not as in sort of just sitting there feeling guilty, but more a sense of shying away from very unwholesome, negative states of mind that can cause you harm, and also will affect your relations with other people, because you look at a lot of porn, usually it starts to damage your relations with other people as well, people around you. So the sense of shame is this sense of wanting to preserve your goodness and your ability to train and develop your mind, and steering away from the more ugly, unwholesome states of mind we can experience as human beings, and the objects that bring that. So, objectification of sexual desire and the objects of sexual desire can have a very damaging effect on a human mind. So you're trying to see that, think it through, see that, and then this sense of shame and the awareness of the consequences of your actions. Addictions make you a kind of slave to a desire. You have to follow it. So you're losing freedom of choice. We usually think about freedom of choice as, I have my rights, I'm entitled to do what I want and all that. But actually, real freedom of choice is having mental control. The ability to say no to a desire rather than just feeling you have to follow it in a compulsive way, a habitual way. And so there's many kinds of addictions we have, and porn is just one. But having, maybe the goal, you want to be free so that you don't follow that desire. Ultimately, you want to be free from the desire. It doesn't even come up in your mind. And that's possible, because many people have proven over the years, over the centuries, you can abandon lustful desire. But at the very least, having the goal that you want to have enough mindfulness to be able to choose to follow or not, to say no. And other things will help, so associating with other people who practice and have good sila and good mindfulness, good self-control, taking on precepts, rules for yourself and saying, I'm not going to watch, would be the obvious one, but things that help you to be where you have to learn where your weaknesses are, obviously maybe around phones and computers. So limiting your time on these devices or limiting your access to the porn in one way or another. Learning to appreciate other kinds of happiness and peace in other ways. So learning, going on retreats where you don't use a computer or a phone, which at first may be very challenging, but over time you might start to acquire a taste for not having to depend on technology, which is usually what porn requires. You may still have some sexual fantasies and that, and imagination coming up, but at least you're not engaging with it using technology. So, meditation retreats are good for that as a starting point. Going for a walk in the countryside, different kinds of pleasures which are not based on sexual or sensual desire. You have to maybe start steering yourself away from your old habits towards new habits. And so on. There's a whole range of supportive conditions which will help you to move away from an addiction like porn. But ultimately you have to be willing to say no to the desire to watch and look until that desire weakens in your mind. It doesn't come up so often, you're not engaging it, indulging it so often, so it doesn't come up so often, not so strongly, and then you've got more power to say no, I'll just leave it. So it is challenging, but it can be done, and many people have dealt with their addiction. There's obviously other, counselling and groups in society who can help you to give up various addictions, such as porn as well. So there's a whole range of things out there. It's up to you to make the effort and work with it until you have more self-control. What did Ajahn Chah say when the American monk kept thinking of his girlfriend, and then asked Ajahn Chah, can I write to my girlfriend? And normally you think, a young monk writing to his girlfriend, not a good thing. He's going to end up making himself want to go back to his girlfriend, give up being a monk. Ajahn Chah knew this one, so he said, you're thinking of writing to your girlfriend. Okay, you can write to your girlfriend. But when you write the letter, ask her for something. Ask her to send you a little bottle with some of her excrement in it. Send back to you, and then when you're missing your girlfriend, every time you miss her, open the little bottle and take a sniff. This is the way monks deal with sexual desire. They practice what we call asupa kammatthana, focusing on the unattractive side of the body. Whoever you're in love with or infatuated with, you're starting to look at the bits that are not so attractive, don't smell so nice, don't look so nice, because every human body has that side to it. And when you're obsessed with sexual desire, you're ignoring that. You're only looking at the bits you like, or thinking about the bits you like and the pleasure it gives you. But when you practice meditating on the unattractive sides of the body, you're looking at and focusing on those bits that are not very attractive, and it balances up your way of looking at the body, so you're no longer so obsessed with it. You realize, even the most beautiful person in the world still has excrement, urines. They sweat, they smell, they get old, they get grey hairs, they get wrinkles. This is something that Buddhist monks do quite a lot of, and some people don't understand. They think Buddhist monks are weird or wrong or something, but it's just a way of understanding more deeply the nature of the human body, so you're not obsessed in a lustful way with it. Anyway, it's something to think about. So that's the end of today's questions.